Today, our interview takes us to a cabin in upstate New York, where I'll be visiting with Dr. Wanda Walborn. Wanda and her husband Ron have just returned from a country where they have been encouraging house church leaders in a culture that's very hostile to the gospel. And they are taking a few days to just rest and recuperate and then head back to New York City, where they are in leadership and education. I really appreciate having this time with Wanda today. She challenges us. She has some key things to say, especially to women and about our gifting and our ministry. So join the conversation with us. I'm really happy to introduce you to Dr. Wanda Walborn. She is the Associate Professor of Spiritual Formation at Nyack College and Alliance Theological Seminary. Wanda also is an author, and we'll be talking about her book today as well. Welcome, Wanda.
Thank you, Cheryl. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Let's talk about spiritual formation, since that is what you teach at the school. What actually is spiritual formation?
Spiritual formation is an umbrella of discipleship. Oftentimes people feel like it's either or, that spiritual formation is the new trend. And so they've put discipleship to the side, which is not true. The Great Commission in Matthew 28 is very clear, go into all the world and make disciples. And that is what we do as the church and as the people of God. But spiritual formation is another element of that, meaning a discipleship program. Normally, when someone comes to Christ, immediately a church will say, okay, now you need to be discipled. So they'll either enter a class or maybe a group, or maybe even get a mentor where the person will teach them how to read the Bible, how to pray, spiritual disciplines, tithing, what it means for baptism, all of the tenets of the faith. But spiritual formation, what I'm saying is giving God space in our lives to help us become like Jesus from the inside out. And it has a threefold purpose for us to reflect the character of God, form a people of God, and then for us to participate in God's reconciling plan with mankind. So discipleship is much more ongoing through our whole, until we see Jesus. We're going to be formed into the image of Christ to become like Jesus. And so it's not just know these things about the Lord, about Christianity, about the faith, which sometimes discipleship can become that, but is we are drawing near to the person of Jesus Christ and becoming like him. And therefore, that is why spiritual formation is an ongoing process until we see him face to face.
Mm-hmm. So our time frame for spiritual formation is really our entire lives, which is a little bit contrary to some of the things we've been taught, I think. We tend to feel like we go through a course, as you say, or go through a period of years where we take in a lot of spiritual knowledge, and hopefully that translates into how we actually live out our lives. But you're saying that actually the timeline should be our entire life for
Yes.
transformation.
And again, if I'm defining it as giving God space in our lives, the more you make room for the Lord and the more you fall in love with Jesus, the more you realize there's more of him. So I feel like the longer I know him, the more I don't know him, because there's huge facets, and I realize he's much grander, much more awesome, much more beautiful than I've even experienced. And so it's not like, yeah, this is it. I've maintained, I'm almost 60, so let's just, flatten off and let the rest of them do it. It's like, oh my gosh, there's so much more. And in any love relationship, there is an excitement to continue to go and for this relationship to be developed. So one of the phrases that I do like to use is make room for me. And I feel like the Lord was saying is says that prophetically to us, make room for me, but we also as the people of God, we want people to make room for us. And that's why in our journey, we're making room for the Lord and we're also making room for others because you can't walk a journey alone. The spiritual journey must be done with other people to hold us accountable, to empower us, to spur us on, and um, and it's very, very important that we do it together.
I noticed in your book you talk about four different types of spiritual formation. And I really identified with that because I realized that the first portion of my life was one type of spiritual formation. But then as I grew to know the Lord more and went deeper with Him, I changed to a different type of spiritual formation.
Well, the way I phrased it is that there's four types of people on the journey. So the four types of people, the first is the theoretician. The theoretician is the person that loves doctrine, theology. For their times with the Lord, they're going to read commentaries and books and concordances and biblical encyclopedias and things like that. They want truth and they want accuracy and they love head knowledge. And so their heart, and again, there's nothing wrong with good theology and good doctrine, but oftentimes their heart does not engage with the Lord and they're very, very protected against that. And the next person is the diagnostician. The diagnostician views everything through their own personal relationship with the Lord or their own church denomination. And so if our church doesn't do that, that's not of God. If, and so it can be, again, very narrow and it can be a very head thing that it's easy to um, uh, judge others strictly by my own experience. The next one is the observer. The observer comes along and says, could this be God? And is more open to step into moments in the presence of the Lord. And that's kind of where, as they move closer, they recognize that, well, maybe even though my church hasn't experienced that, even though I have never experienced that, it sounds like it could be God, according to stories that I've heard in the Bible. And then the fourth person is the practitioner. And the practitioner says, you know what, I am going to step in. I've observed that it could be God, and now I'm going to step in and say, yes, I'm going to try this out and see if indeed I can get closer to the Lord. And so there's, you still have good theology, you still have a firm foundation, you have good doctrine, but it's moving so that there is both a head and a heart relationship, and the two are both fully engaged. And so but there's an exclusivity, obviously, with our relationship with the Lord, with love. Like every love relationship is exclusive. A pure love relationship there is exclusivity. Jesus is the only way. There's no other way to come to the Father but through Him. But there are things that I'm learning along the way about prayer, about spiritual disciplines, about fasting, about other things that I'm not sure, but I'm going to try and walk with others maybe. And that's where I think that people our age or older have such a great opportunity to come alongside younger people, either married couples, engaged couples, college students, just so many of the younger generations, and talk to them about their relationship with the Lord and show them how beautiful Jesus really is in light of all that we have experienced throughout our life. Again, holding firmly to the Word of God, but there's so much more that our generation could be doing, even just mentoring, listening, asking, praying, that I think I would love to see revived in the church, so that it's not just we go to the 50 and over group and have our little get-togethers. There's so much more we could be doing to help disciple the younger ones.
What are some of the things that get in the way of our spiritual formation?
I think uh, our pain, not grieving our losses, anger, unforgiveness, shame, fear. I think all of those things can very much get in the way of our growing closer to the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that again, I think stillness, that's why I think in a noisy world, we need to come away and learn how to be still, how to be quiet. And what is inside us will bubble up, and the Lord will name it. And once something is named inside of us, once we recognize what it is, we can now deal with it. Otherwise, it just churns. And that's part of, I think, the anxiety of our culture is not taking the time to be still, to figure out what it is, and then deal with it. It just keeps getting distracted, pushed aside, and we just keep going with the turmoil within. Um, and again, we numb our pain and we distract ourselves. And the beauty of walking with someone else to say, let's just be quiet and listen to the Lord and see what He wants to speak to us. Again, make room for Him. He will show up and speak to you. He's a speaking God.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to let you know what's going on. That's one prayer. Absolutely. He will let you know.
Yes.
But it's
I
been
heard
quiet enough to hear him.
we learn to hide things pretty early in life. And we become very good at hiding
Mhm,
what we do not want people to see. And yet, like you say, eventually it bubbles up through some kind of crisis we encounter or some kind of event. It bubbles up and we can't maintain that hiding anymore. And
mhm,
that's really a crisis place, but it is also a place of the opportunity for freedom.
mhm. Absolutely. In the book, I call it our place of brokenness. And so to talk with people, they're like, wait, broken? I'm not broken. I'm a new creation. The old is gone, the new has come. And even that's true in our spirit, but our soul is our mind, our will, and our emotions. Our mind, which is constantly needing to be renewed, according to Romans 12:2. Our emotions, again, need to be called into alignment with the kingdom for what is true. And our will must constantly be surrendered to the lordship of Christ, because we all want our own way. Isaiah 53 says we all, like sheep, have gone astray. We do want our own way. So those issues, even though we have, our spirit man has come alive to Christ, our soul issues are still there and need to be surrendered to the Lord. And so as we journey along, that's what gets exposed by the Spirit of God to show us, you need to deal with your will. This is about anger. You have issues of unforgiveness. These are seeds of bitterness. You need to let things go. And again, that's why. So that's what the new term of soul care, that's what they're talking about, dealing with your mind, the will, and the emotions. Yes, our spirit man is alive, but our soul is still wounded and needs the redemptive work of Christ. That's what sanctification is, that ongoing sanctifying work of the Spirit in our lives. And that's what takes from now until we see Jesus to deal with in our lives, honestly, truthfully. And so, the area of brokenness, I say, what is the one place in your life that you hope no one ever finds out about you?
Mm.
And the answer to that will be your place of brokenness.
Mm-hmm.
And in the book, I share personally where for me, it was when I was pregnant with our fourth child, anger started just coming out all over the place, and I could not contain it. And it was so disproportionate to what the kids had done. And I even hid it from Ron. And so oftentimes, when shame is involved, there's usually silence, secrecy, and suffering alone. And so I kept it from him. He would think I'm a bad mother. If he knew how hard I was spanking the kids, how I was treating them, he would divorce me. And so I hid it, hid it, hit it. It finally reached such a place where I'm like, I have to tell him and I have to bring it into the light, regardless of what happens. And as I did that, he was very gracious and he was like, "Oh, honey, you probably just had a bad day." And I'm like, "No, this is out of control." And as you know, I we went to seek help. I went to church, and that's where the pastor preached on it's okay not to be okay. And that was the day of something unlocking inside of me and a whole range of emotions starting to rise up. Um, and then the Lord really leading me into a time of inner healing. I started meeting with the pastor and his wife, every week for many, many months to deal with the anger and all that lies underneath it. Um, and so that was my place of brokenness, but I was trying to hide it. And again, the shameful part of it was my husband was a pastor. Like, how terrible, you were a bad pastor's wife. Um, and that's where I feel like sometimes we get trapped, where we need help. We are not okay, but where do we go? What do we do? And that's why we must bring those things into the light, in order for the Lord to bring healing and for others to walk with us.
Yes. Yeah. What encouragement would you have for people that feel like maybe they've hit a wall in their spiritual journey? They've been in church for years, maybe they're very educated about the Bible, but they know deep down inside they are not experiencing
Mhm.
all that God has for them.
I I do think that God allows us to go through those periods to cause us to long for him. And I think that those times of longing and at times desperation, hunger, spiritual thirsting are really, really good. And when you look in the Psalms, even in, and I mean, John of the Cross called it, dark nights of the soul, where God purposely, sometimes I think they come as a result of us praying for more. It doesn't seem like the two would go together, but Lord, I want more of you. Certainly there's got to be more than what I'm experiencing. This is getting dull, boring, routine, Ugh. And the Lord says, "Okay, let me pull back then all your scaffolding, all your little parts that have worked, let's take those away and now see what's left in your longing. Will you keep coming after me? Will you keep coming to seek me? Will you keep coming to find me?" And in that seeking is where, um, there are the breakthroughs of the walls. The Lord again shows us places of the unforgiveness, the fear, and asking him, "Lord, will you draw me and will you give me more of yourself?" And I also ask, like, what is going on with me? I ask that directly. Is there a blockage? Have I sinned? I mean, and it wasn't until I actually learned what dark night of the soul really was, that that's a normal part of the journey, that to go deeper, God needs to change things up, and he purposely changes things up to cause that seeking to deepen. And that no matter how long I have to wait for him to return, I will wait because I have nowhere else to go. He has the words of life, and I will not live without him. And so it is a deepening, and I call it an increasing of capacity of our hearts to be able to receive more of him. And again, those are the times where he has to show us what is in our heart that is taking up space that he could and wants to occupy. In some ways, it's almost like a giving up. I have, I let me try to fast more. Let me try to read more. Let me try to pray more. How about let me come and say, Father, what are you doing? I want more of you. And I just, whatever you bring to me, I will wait for you. I'm here. Will you show me? Will you show me what you're doing? And waiting. I think that whole concept of waiting. I have done tons of book studies and lots of beautiful studies on waiting for the Lord. In Psalm 27:14, which says, "Be strong and take courage and wait for the Lord." I think it takes more strength to wait than to go, "Oh well, I'll just go pick up the next book, audiobook." podcast,
Right.
instead of waiting for him
Mm.
and waiting for his word to your heart, not everybody else's great word. It's like, what is the word of the Lord to for me? And really seeking him and waiting until I get it for as long as that takes. That's discipline. That's saying, yes, you have the words of life, and I will come to you to receive them.
Mm.
That's been lost, I think.
Yes.
Um, and so I'm going to show you this. Here's my book,
I was going to
and
ask
it
if
says,
you could tell us about it.
Spiritual Journey, Can I Really Get Close to God?
Mhm.
And the way that I broke that up is to, I went after areas of our lives that block us from intimacy. And I addressed those things like shame, fear, anger, refusal of love. And then I talked about different disciplines that help us move through the obstacles. And so the very first one I call the discipline of yes. And what I that's not a traditional spiritual discipline,
Right.
but what is needed, again, back to a soul issue of our will. We don't pick and choose the things along the journey. I don't want to do that. Forget it. No, I gave my life to the Lord. I say yes to him, and my yes includes everything he will ever bring up from now until I see him face to face. I don't see what it is and then go, I'll decide whether or not I want to do it. No, I give you my yes. And so in that, there is a surrendering of our will. There's a softening of our heart. There is an openness to receive and hear even the difficult words of the Lord. And I think that that is something that very early on we need to teach people. Again, it's not a pick and choose relationship. It's, I'm in this and I will do whatever you say. I will follow you anywhere, do anything. And it's a constant surrendering again to his lordship.
There's a lot of trust involved in that, isn't there?
Yes, absolutely.
Built
Absolutely.
built only over time
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
struggle.
Yes.
Your your group Empower that you began. Tell us a little bit about that because that's a resource that people could tap into if they'd like. So tell us about Empower.
Okay. Empower is a program for women that 9 years ago I was asked to develop uh, for to help women in effective ministry. So we train, equip, and release them for more effective ministry. So at empowerww.org is our website, and we run September through April, and it's once a month, and we do. There's books to read, papers to write, things like that. But what we're trying to do is help women understand their identity in Christ. What are their spiritual gifts? What has God called you to do? And then releasing you to go step out into the world and do that. Now, we very specifically have said to advance the kingdom of God, not to advance the church, because we have several denominations. So we have about 10 or 12 different denominations every year that take Empower. We're in about 26 states, 13 countries. We live stream all over the world. We're now working on translating into Spanish, French, Arabic, um, in other language, because we want to bring it to the women of those countries.
Mhm.
But what has been interesting, and the reason I say advance the kingdom, is because once a woman understands who she is, how God has gifted her, her calling to advance the kingdom may be outside the church. So in her community, in her workplace, in the kids' schools, all sorts of places outside, in the marketplace. And so she needs to step into where God has called her to serve and to be and to do. And so it's been thrilling to watch how that has just taken off. And so we have it's a one Saturday per month. It's 9 to 6. There's teaching, and then there's a 2-hour mentoring group at the end so you can process what's going on in your life. And again, that's another area I feel that Otherwise, you can go in, you can take in knowledge, you can leave, and no one knows you're hurting. No one knows how bad things are, and no one's walking with you. And so the 2 hour group at the end gives you community, someone to hear your story, and someone to pray for you
Hmm.
and walk with you during that time. And so we're just thrilled. We also have 2 advanced classes after that, one on mentoring, how to mentor other women, and then one on preaching. And so we just want to equip women to be who God has called them to be, advance the kingdom, go forward in the fullness of who they are as his daughters.
That's great. God's doing a new thing, isn't he, with
Amen.
the
Amen.
gifting of women.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
we're seeing more and more of that, and it's beautiful to watch.
Well, what's interesting is that regardless of where different church denominations get hung up on the issue of women in ministry, you know, the titles that may or may not come with that, the roles that may or may not come with that. And Empower was birthed, I believe, out of God's heart to equip. Um, that it doesn't matter your gender, ethnicity, age. Uh, God has called you, he has gifted you, he is equipping you, he has anointed you, and he releases you to be you. And
Mhm.
there will never be someone that can stop that, because he will go before you and make a way. And so, granted, a church and a particular role might not, that might have issues around it. But as far as the kingdom goes, God will always make a way for you. And the phrase he gave me a few years ago is that in the spirit, there's no ceiling. And that as you draw near to him and you do what he's asked you to do, you be who he's asked you to be, and now go do what he's asked you to do, there will always be opportunity, because he is going to make a way for you. And so that's kind of where people that are hung up on the issues, okay, but I'm going to go and be who God has called me to be. And there will always be a place, there will always be people to minister to, there will always be the because we are carriers of his presence. And
Right.
so I feel like as carriers of his presence, we are naturally supernatural, that I can show up here and the Lord might give me something to pray for you, speak to you. And I'm just ordinary. We're all just ordinary, average people. But when the Spirit of God, you know, supercharges that and comes through with his power, people change, things happen, chains break, people are set free, people
Mhm.
are healed, deliverance comes. I mean, that's amazing. And so we offer ourselves to God, and he does the rest.
We saw that in the book of Acts,
Amen.
where
Amen.
God poured out his spirit on people.
On
All people, exactly. There was
all.
no specific gender. It was just on all. And
Yeah.
so
Amen.
it's beautiful to watch that outpouring continue, and for women to be so instrumental in spreading the good news and living it out. I appreciate the
Sure.
conversation today. And I will definitely be including the information about Empower and your book, so that
Awesome.
viewers can access that.
Great. Thank you, Cheryl. It's been a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you.